My name is Margaret Cole. And 48 hours ago, I retired a millionaire. I sold the company I built from scratch, bought a beach house on the Outer Banks, and planned to disappear from the noise of deadlines forever. But 8 hours after I arrived, my son called to tell me I needed to move out of my own bedroom because his in-laws were flying in for vacation. He wasn't asking, he was informing me, as if I were a tenant and he were the landlord. When I laughed, he changed his tone, the same cold edge I once heard from his father during our divorce. "If you can't be reasonable, Mom," he said, "there's a beautiful assisted living facility down the highway." That was the moment I realized my peace wasn't being interrupted, it was being invaded. I didn't argue or hang up. I just said, "Of course, Daniel, bring them all." Because sometimes the smartest move isn't to fight back right away, it's to let the enemy unpack first. So while they were planning their beach vacation, I was planning something else entirely. And when they walked into my home acting like owners, they had no idea they were already standing on a battlefield I'd designed myself. This is the story of how a peaceful retirement turned into the most calculated revenge of my life. They arrived before sunrise. A caravan of SUVs grinding up my driveway like an invasion force. From the upstairs window, I watched Olivia step out. First, perfect hair, clipboard in hand, issuing orders to her family as if she were directing a film crew. Her parents followed, each wearing matching resort outfits, and the entitled calm of people who expected to be served. No one knocked. They simply walked through my front door as though my house had been waiting for them. By the time I came downstairs, the sound of laughter and suitcases echoed through every hallway. Olivia turned with a bright, rehearsed smile. "Margaret, you moved upstairs already." "Right. Perfect. Mom needs the master bedroom for her back." Her tone made it clear she wasn't seeking confirmation. Her parents rolled their luggage straight into my room while her sister's kids scattered toward the guest suites. Leaving wet footprints across my polished floor, I stood there, silent, watching my carefully designed sanctuary transform into chaos. Towels piled on antique furniture, snack wrappers on marble counters, and a faint smell of sunscreen mixing with expensive candle wax. Olivia busied herself in my kitchen, rearranging my pantry shelves and stacking her family's groceries where mine used to be. When I asked where she'd like me to store my own food, she waved toward the garage and said, "Anywhere out of the way will be fine." That small sentence said everything. They weren't visitors, they were occupiers. But instead of pushing back, I poured myself coffee and smiled. 30 years in corporate warfare had taught me that nothing unsettles an entitled person more than quiet observation. Let them settle in. Let them underestimate me. Later that afternoon, I called Alan Pierce, my attorney. From the garage, I wanted every line of ownership reviewed, every clause airtight. Then I called the property insurance office and confirmed all access privileges were in my name only. By evening, Olivia's family lounged by the pool, shouting drink orders toward me like I was hired staff. I delivered the Wi-Fi password and refilled their glasses with calm precision. That night, lying awake in the smallest guest room of my own house, I mapped the next moves. They thought they had claimed the territory, but they hadn't seen what a woman does when she's forced into the corner of her own empire. By the third day, Olivia had declared that the house needed life, which in her vocabulary meant a party. Daniel invited 30 people, old friends, new clients, and anyone who might be useful to his crumbling business. He called it a family networking event, the kind that would put the Cole name back on the map. Listening from the hallway, I realized he wasn't just borrowing my home, he was using it as a stage to sell an illusion. I spent the afternoon making a few calls of my own. If they wanted a spectacle, I'd give them one worthy of the lie they were telling. By 6 o'clock the next evening, caterers from the city arrived in black uniforms, unloading silver trays, crystal glassware, and chilled bottles of Dom Perignon. Olivia's face froze in confusion, then stretched into forced delight when I told her I'd upgraded the barbecue to a fine dining experience. As the deck filled with guests, Daniel worked the crowd with a salesman's grin, telling anyone who'd listen that he was managing the family property. The words drifted across the air like smoke from a slow-burning fuse. When I joined the party, every eye turned toward me, the aging matriarch expected to play hostess while her son basked in borrowed authority. Instead, I lifted my glass and thanked everyone for coming to Daniel's event. The crowd laughed politely, assuming it was a joke. But I wasn't joking. I turned to the head caterer and asked him, loud enough for the group to hear, to hand all billing to Daniel Cole, the property's manager. The color drained from his face while murmurs rippled through the guests. Champagne bubbles sparkled under the string lights as the reality of the moment began to sink in. Olivia's smile flickered, her hand tightening around her glass. I lingered long enough to watch Daniel's panic settle behind his polite mask. The caterers laid out prime rib and lobster tails, a feast worthy of a corporate gala. Every course served that night came with a receipt he would be forced to explain. I clinked my glass once more, meeting his eyes across the crowd. Let the guests toast to his success. I thought they'd remember this night long after he wished to forget it. The morning after the party smelled like stale champagne and regret. Daniel and Olivia sat at my dining table surrounded by empty bottles. Flipping through receipts with growing panic. The catering invoice, $15,000. Due immediately lay open between them like a verdict. Their whispers carried the sharp edge of blame, each trying to decide who had made the bigger mistake. I poured myself coffee and watched the scene unfold. Daniel finally looked up, his face pale. "Mom, we need to talk about this bill," he said, as if we were partners in a small misunderstanding. I reminded him, gently, that he had introduced himself to every guest as the property's manager and that managers handle expenses. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Olivia tried to recover first, insisting that I could simply absorb the cost since it was technically my home. Her voice cracked when I placed the invoice directly in front of Daniel and told her, without raising mine, that the caterers would be billing him personally. Just then, the phone rang an agent from a local real estate firm asking to confirm that my representative, Mr. Cole, had listed the property for sale. I put the call on speaker. The agent repeated every word Daniel had told her, and the air in the room went cold. When I ended the call, I didn't raise my voice or make threats. I simply told them to pack their things and leave within 2 hours before I contacted both the police and the realtor to file reports of impersonation. Olivia opened her mouth to argue, but Daniel's silence stopped her. They thought the party had made them powerful. The bill proved who was truly in charge. The silence after their departure was the loudest sound my house had ever held. For the first time in days, I could hear the ocean again. But the calm didn't last long. A week later, a courier arrived at my gate with a thick envelope from a law firm in Raleigh. Daniel had hired an attorney named Rebecca Miles to accuse me of financial instability and diminished capacity. Reading the complaint felt like stepping into an alternate reality. According to his filing, I had been manipulated into erratic financial decisions and was unfit to manage assets without family oversight. It was an elegant way of saying he wanted control of my money. I called Alan Pierce, my longtime attorney, who laughed once before turning serious. He promised to respond with every receipt, witness statement, and document proving my clarity of mind. Within days, Alan filed a counterclaim that painted the true picture: Daniel's unauthorized communications with real estate agents, his unpaid debts, and the party invoice he had falsely represented as business expenses. Rebecca's confidence faltered once she realized how thoroughly my son had exposed himself. When she called to negotiate, Alan informed her that my case included evidence of attempted elder financial exploitation, a charge no lawyer wanted attached to their client's name. By the end of the week, she quietly withdrew from representing him. But Daniel wasn't finished. Unable to win in court, he turned to something crueler. 2 weeks later, Adult Protective Services showed up unannounced at my door, saying they'd received an anonymous report that I was neglected and unable to care for myself. The accusation was laughable and infuriating. I welcomed the investigator inside, offered her coffee, and walked her through my immaculate home, my accounts, and the property contracts I managed personally. When she left, she apologized for the inconvenience and assured me the case would be marked unfounded. Standing on my porch afterward, I realized Daniel's tactics were only making my position stronger. Every attempt to undermine me became more proof of his intent. The legal war he'd started was no longer about a house. It was about control. And he had just handed me the evidence to destroy him with precision. The day after the investigator cleared my name, I called Alan and told him I was done playing defense. For months, Daniel had tried to paint me as unfit, and it was time he learned what it felt like to be truly powerless. Alan agreed to begin drafting a restraining order and preparing the groundwork for elder abuse charges. But I wanted something sharper, something that would make him understand the cost of turning on the person who had given him everything. I contacted Mike Santos, a private investigator I'd used during a corporate acquisition years ago. Within 48 hours, he sent me a report that was as detailed as it was damning. Daniel's agency was 3 months behind on rent. His credit cards were maxed, and Olivia had taken out personal loans under both of their names. The most chilling part was a section showing that Daniel had visited 3 different elder law attorneys 6 months earlier, inquiring about gaining conservatorship over a parent. He had been planning my legal captivity long before he ever set foot in my house. That night, I sat on the deck with a glass of wine and watched the waves roll in. I wasn't angry anymore. I was deliberate. I called each of his creditors, quietly providing documentation of his recent financial irregularities. I didn't accuse him of anything. I simply asked that they verify their risk exposure. Then I had Alan file a motion citing attempted financial exploitation, attaching the full investigative report. The fallout came quickly. His business accounts were frozen pending review, and his landlord began eviction proceedings. Olivia left 2 days later, leaving behind a note that said she refused to drown for someone else's pride. When Daniel finally called me, his voice was stripped of arrogance. He demanded to know why I'd ruined him. I told him calmly that I hadn't ruined him. I'd documented him. He said I'd gone too far. I told him he should have thought about that before he weaponized my age against me. Sons protect their mothers. Daniel had tried to own his bration. By the time the call ended, the last thread of sympathy I'd ever felt for him was gone, replaced by something steadier: peace. 6 months later, the beach house was everything I'd dreamed. It would be quiet, profitable, and entirely mine. I converted it into a luxury vacation rental managed by a small firm in Wilmington. Every booking brought new guests who treated the property with respect, and every payment was another reminder that peace can be both emotional and financial. The space that once felt invaded now felt restored. Daniel's final attempt at contact came through his attorney. It was a formal letter, equal parts apology and plea, asking for a chance to rebuild the relationship. I read it once and handed it to Alan without a word. His reply was brief and professional: Ms. Cole wishes you well in your life. as she continues living hers. That was the only closure either of us would get. Sometimes I sit on the deck at sunrise, coffee in hand, and think about how close I came to losing everything I built. It's strange how quickly love can turn into entitlement when money enters the equation. But I've learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you choose who to open for. I've locked mine carefully. The ocean doesn't ask for forgiveness, it just keeps moving. So do I. My son lost his inheritance, his reputation, and his illusion of control. I kept what mattered: my freedom, my name, and my peace. And at this stage in life, that's the kind of wealth no one can steal. Thank you for watching until the very end. If this story spoke to you, please subscribe so you never miss what comes next. And if you carry a story of your own, I invite you to share it in the comments. Your voice matters here. Always.